Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trek Before. This one is truly, finally, a matter of perspective. That's right, it's a matter of perspective. This week on It's All Been Trek Before. This is not a matter of perspective. Go look us up on Facebook. It's All Been Trek Before. Go there and give us your perspective on what we're talking about, the episodes every week. You can keep up with us. Talk to us. Mix it up with us. You know, tell us what you think about our perspectives after you listen to us talk about a matter of perspective on It's All Been Trek Before.
Welcome out to a new episode of It's All Been Trek Before. Our regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
Deja Keith.
Jimmy-Jerome.
Which reminds me, I forgot to say last week, I should have written it down. The title didn't really make any sense to me. I mean, if you want to do a Q pun, fine, but it just didn't really... Deja Q, what would that even mean?
I never stopped to think about it till you said it, but you're right. I mean, other than the end when he throws up the mariachi band and stuff, I guess that's kind of deja vu.
Yeah.
But to name the episode after an ending tag is not,
Yeah,
I wish I'd thought it through. I can't think of something off the top of my head either. I mean, it could be IQ, sort of, because it's, but I kind of feel like that's not quite there. Anyway.
IQ 2000 or something, yeah.
So this episode, first
IQ is what it should have been called.
High Q, I like that. Especially if he smoked some pot.
Or low Q because he's been cast out.
First impressions on a matter of perspective.
This is another legal episode, so you're going to get a lot of legal talk from me. I thought it was interesting. I called it Space Rashomon, which it kind of was. It's a holodeck episode, which I always get a little leery of.
They used it for a different purpose than...
They did.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider this a holodeck episode. Holodeck was a tool rather than entertainment.
Yeah, but as soon as they mentioned holodeck, I was like, oh boy. But actually, it was a different way they use it. I'm still I'm very leery of using it as the way they seem to use it as evidence in a trial, as opposed to suggestions of what could have happened. But I'll get deeper into that later. But all that said, I enjoyed it. I thought it was an enjoyable episode. It's got some warts for sure, but I have a ton of notes. But
I was going to say, pretty much the same thing. And for viewers, listeners, whatever, if it's not clear, I'm not being sarcastic whenever I say yay. I really do like hearing Steven's legal perspective on these things.
Me too. I think it's always good. We have the legal corner.
I'm generally fascinated by procedurals anyway when these kinds of things happen. Yeah, I did note Rashomon eventually in this after more of the perspective jokes.
Yeah, I liked it. I think, like I said, I remembered it pretty well, so I already knew what the twist was at the end.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. But I still liked it. I still found it enjoyable.
I will say the fact that I was not sure who the killer was or whatever until the end. Yeah, I kept thinking, well, it's going to be a cliched ending. But I'm like, wait a minute. It doesn't matter what ending they choose. It's going to be, it's a whodunit or whatever cliche. Other than I knew Riker didn't do it.
Well, you only had 3 suspects the whole time.
Yeah.
So it was a very simple, straightforward mystery.
To that point, I would say that they could have pulled the thing where it's not an completely unknown suspect, right at the end there's somebody you didn't even see as a character. That's usually cheating, I guess, when you want to do a whodunit
from a certain point of view.
From a certain perspective.
But I did think the title was taken from Star Wars from a certain point of view.
Except this came out long before that, but those are the first. I haven't finished reading the first one yet.
A certain point of view was Jedi. Looks like you lied. Well, so you see, from a certain point of view, it's Ben Kenobi's way of getting around the fact that he didn't tell Luke the truth.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't.
You see, from a certain point of view, I told you the truth.
I wasn't thinking of that at all. I was just thinking of the books that have come out for the New Hope, and
which I haven't got, but I'd like to. But
I feel like
I've read about half of the New Hope one. It's good.
Yeah, I'd like to check those out.
I feel like there's something like that came up during the prequels about the idea of what a Jedi can and can't do, or like the concept of Vulcans lying by omission, or other things.
Vulcans not being able to lie is a myth that they've used to their advantage. It was never true.
Well, that too. I didn't think that I'd seen it until they got to a certain scene, which I'll mention when we get to it. But for the most part, I did not recall what was going to happen at all. And so I still appreciated the way that unfolded.
Nice. What do you think of the opening scene in which Data walked in on Picard's art class?
My first note was the art is a matter of perspective, all caps.
Oh, God. They were all different perspectives as Data was going through and evaluating them.
But even, the artists were facing the model from different perspective. All the pictures were different different techniques. And
I like that we never actually saw Picard's. I thought it was interesting that, because I thought
we did see it.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, I had to keep rolling it back a couple of times to catch the different things, but I'm pretty sure we saw the more basic, like the.
Oh, you're right. We did. Yeah. You're right.
Early on, not when Data was doing the evaluation. I think we needed to see it again then.
And I thought we were just going to see Data walk around and look at him, but then when he went into his art criticism, I thought that was cool.
Yeah.
I wish he'd brought in more non-Earth references, but he did have a Vulcan reference in there.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was reading something that said essentially this part of the episode kind of previews the rest of the episode because it's really about a matter of perspective.
It does, and yet it also totally felt like one of those cold opens from The Office that don't actually fit with everything else.
Yeah.
As its own thing.
And I enjoyed it as its own thing.
Right. So it kind of threaded that needle. But I agree, it does fit. I thought it was extremely weird that Picard basically tells Data to judge the work, and Picard's looking at Picard's work. Or sorry, Data's looking at Picard's work, and then goes and judges the other two first and comes back to Picard. And I get that was the setup for the joke, but it didn't make sense for the logistics of the scene. Picard should have seen him come in and met him at the door, and then it would have made sense as they went around.
When Data walked in, they showed him giving like a cursory glance at the model, like, like, I'm looking for Picard. I don't care about this. It's like a way to demonstrate to the audience, like, look how emotionless I am. I don't care about this naked woman. I just want to find Picard.
I was surprised they showed a naked woman in Next Gen. I thought that was a little risque for the show and the time period.
It was an attention grabber, that's for sure.
Unless you're Data, which is the point.
A minus opening because of my gripe about the judging order.
From my perspective, it was a great opening.
It almost could have been another poker scene or something where they do some other, the idea of there being a good hand versus bad hand, and maybe a little forced as far as one of those kinds of, we're going to show you something.
Sure.
But it was a creative visual way of doing that.
Yeah.
The starbase exploding, I thought, was a pretty exciting hook.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The only thing I didn't buy was I feel like they should have built a new starbase model because I felt like that was one we'd seen before. And then they immediately say Dr. Apgar was the only one on the station at the time it exploded. And I'm like, there's no way that entire station only has one person on it.
Yeah.
So it seemed too big for what they were trying to
way too big that only 3 people were living on it. They should have built a new model. I want to say the opening ended when they wanted to take Riker into custody. Am I wrong?
Yeah, when the guy, the investigator, inspector, I think they use both terms. He says, under suspicion of murder. He dragged out murder. I was like, okay, it's an Agatha Christie episode.
Sorry, I have one last thing about the cold open then. I said that we were seeing the bridge from a different perspective. The backward shot over it. I didn't even realize where they were until they went back off the, to the ready room or whatever. So, yes.
Nice.
Matter of perspective.
I'll sprinkle in my legal stuff as we go through, but my first thing is the Starfleet regulation that essentially gives home court law, which kind of makes sense. If you're at that planet, you should honor their laws, but it also gives the captain the discretion as far as extradition, which I feel like is a pretty good compromise, really. Although it seems like the ship should have a legal officer. Well, haven't we had one? Haven't we had a legal counsel or legal officer?
I don't think not on a ship. I think on star bases.
Yeah. I think TOS they implied that there would.
Yeah. So I mean, and I guess the captain has the discretion also to use. He can take advice from everybody, as many people as possible, and on the legalities, and I guess the regulations and everything else. So I thought that was interesting. Again, I think it probably makes sense, but I think that captain's discretion has to be pretty good because I mean, as we've experienced, not all of them have great systems of law. The Justice episode comes to mind because the Justice episode is always coming into my mind. But
I guess that's why they give the captain the prerogative, even though that really doesn't seem all that fair to the respecting other.
Well, a couple of things about that. First, I want to ask Stephen to expand on home court law. Is that like an actual term?
No, it's kind of just one I use. Just I'm mushing sports in there, but I think if it's kind of like if you're in Ohio if if we went to New York State and did whatever we did there that got us in trouble, I
think Nevada's probably the better example.
Yeah, that's a good one. We're going to be tried under the laws of that state unless we can.
But Nevada doesn't have any laws, does it?
Unless we can find a good reason to bring it back to Ohio, and that's a study of law in and of itself. Jurisdiction and court shopping, that stuff. I mean, you can take courses as to what court you want to try your DUI case in Columbus. I know I took one years ago.
Based on judges or counties or what?
Yeah, just based on judges and that kind of stuff, which is, that's a more, obviously, a micro subject. But yeah, generally speaking, you're going to be at the, if you're in Thailand, as we've learned, you're at the mercy of, although I will say, while we're talking here, now that I brought in Thailand, I was reading, somebody made the argument, well, Riker would have had diplomatic immunity as visiting, and that's another element there. Obviously,
that would played into justice as well, or it should have potentially, but
that would have been a less interesting episode.
Yeah,
I don't think diplomatic immunity exists in Starfleet.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't work the way it works in Lethal Weapon 2.
It's been revoked.
Yeah, that is not the way diplomatic immunity works either. But so I'll just throw that out there. I thought that was an interesting concept. Like I said, I think it makes sense, but I think the Starfleet wiggle room is that discretion of the captain, and I guess it gives Starfleet and the Federation a lot of leeway to be like, well, we don't. I guess it's little jurisdiction shopping. Like, we don't really like your laws, so we're gonna not do this. Which, lots of that happens here. We've had people that'll have committed crimes in other countries or committed crimes here. Like, I'll use Roman Polanski. He committed a crime here. He went back to France. We couldn't get him we've never been able to get him extradited here. So that kind of happens in the real world too. It's not at the discretion of the captain. It's kind of at the discretion of the country and that kind of stuff. But so I kind of see it that way as well. But obviously it sets up a good conflict. Sets up a good conflict for Picard, which I feel like he once again handles very well.
I just want to know what your take on the system being guilty until proven innocent was.
Oh, that's a good one too. And obviously we're innocent until proven guilty, and some people, there's a lot of people who'd be okay if we flipped it around to guilty until proven innocent.
Well, I think in practice, generally,
you're right.
That's the whole point of the jury vetting. Hopefully, is to keep people from having that presumption. But I don't think in real life it can really.
You're right, and I think depending on and I think that's getting to a bigger legal issue. A lot of. And I'll talk to DUI because I've taken more classes on that. But, a lot of that is you're presumed guilty. And, I think that's, and again, when we're talking about the poor that can't afford to be out of work and that kind of stuff, they, their system of justice is different from the rich. That's definitely a different thing. And so for them, there is a presumption of guilt. And even if they are innocent, you'll get a lot of guilty pleas just because they can't afford to take the chance that they won't be. And again, that's a different issue altogether. But I mean, I'm an American, so I believe in innocent until proven guilty, whether the system works perfectly or not. So that's taken it back. And I think it kind of colors some of the way that the evidence is treated, and just the fact that, this guy's called the inspector and the investigator, but I don't know why it took me 30 minutes in the episode to realize, no, he's just a prosecutor. He's a prosecutor because I thought the way he came in, it made it sound like he was more of a judge, but no, he's the prosecutor. So that made it a weird thing too, because there really wasn't a judge.
Well, they hadn't gotten to that point because this was just about the extradition, not whether Riker was guilty or not.
That's true.
I was going to, going back to the whole extradition part of this. It felt like there has been precedence before where you've had the Enterprise, I think in both TOS and this, the idea that the captain wasn't put in a position where they had to decide whether to give somebody asylum for some reason or another. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it just happened to be Riker instead of an alien because he was already physically on the ship. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the differences between this and Justice, for example, because it was harder for them to just yank them out without causing an incident in and of itself. But since Riker was already there, gave them all more agency collectively. But then there's also the factor of there being a power dynamic in the sense of when he's aboard the Enterprise. Does the Enterprise have greater firepower? Could they fight their way out of it if they wanted to? Could they just take off if they wanted to? Could they just kill this guy and go, okay, whatever, bye? I mean, there was always that possibility. And so it's sort of like you have those things with superheroes deciding to put themselves into jail and just like wait and go through the process, because they had to try to hold themselves accountable. I mean, there's often that kind of aspect, that perspective of when you have the ability to just flee whatever you want. It's just they're forcing themselves to live by the standard of not the Prime Directive, but whatever that Starfleet law. I don't know what you call it there, but yeah. So there's the thing of them just forcing themselves to adhere to what the local customs are, which I think creates another part of the conflict.
Yeah, and I guess if Picard wanted to abuse his power, he just said, "No, we're not extraditing. See you. We're out."
Yeah.
And I guess they could also make the argument, well, we're just putting on a show, but I think obviously they didn't. I mean, I think they're evident. They actually, their case at the end, they actually put together evidence, and I get into that too. What would have really helped Riker was to not look guilty. I mean,
what do you mean?
Every time they asked him something, he was like Peter Lorre looking around furtively, like, well, I can't really tell you. And he wouldn't say anything. Why don't you just, hey, Captain, can I talk to you about it? Hey, why don't you just tell me what happened? Just give me the Time Warner synopsis.
I hadn't caught that. That's.
I think Riker was just trying to hold his temper in check because they were unfairly maligning him so badly.
Once we get to the trial, I thought he did a pretty good job for the most part.
Yeah.
But prior to the expedition, I thought on the bridge, they're like, he's like, what happened? He's like, ooh, boy, what did I do? It just seemed like every time they showed his face, he was like,
well, I think he was confused at first, and then when he tried to talk to Picard wouldn't talk to him.
Yeah, I think part of that for the writing was building drama, but the other thing is later. It made sense later on too because of we get to that statement where he says, "I'm going to tell my captain to expect your complaint," and so he probably was trying to make that statement essentially. The whole thing about that was the part of his story where he's like, I know this situation was weird. I know I was in a compromising looking situation with the wife. I know that this guy is going to lodge a complaint. I have to go and do this. And so when you suddenly you have an authority figure showing up and saying you've done something wrong and then also murder, it's like, I need to talk.
I mean, I get why Picard went and talked to him, but it felt really weird to see Picard excluding him in the beginning, especially when he pulls Data off the bridge and you get that great shot of Picard or of Riker turning his head around the door trying to see in as Data came out of the ready room.
I thought if this wouldn't work for the drama, you just sit Troy and Riker down. She's like, I'm pretty sure I know you didn't do it. He tells her what happened.
We get to that too later, and a
little bit.
We'll get. Well, yeah, I'll wait.
I have thoughts on that too.
I think the reason Picard didn't need to just have Troy talk to Riker and get that is because Picard already knew Riker wasn't guilty from the beginning. I think Picard was purely concentrating on finding evidence to prove Riker was innocent. Yeah. When they say something to Picard later in the episode, Picard's like, yeah, no, I know he didn't do it. If I were Picard and I'd served 3 years with Riker and seen Riker firsthand, I wouldn't think he did it either. I'd be as convinced as Picard was.
Yeah. While we're talking about Troy, this is my fashion/perv part of the episode. I thought
fashion perv.
Yeah, I thought perv. When she looked sad about the whole Riker situation, she's never looked sexier to me. And I know part of that is she was in that turquoise outfit is great. She looked so beautiful. I don't know that Marina Sirtis look more beautiful than that. So
yeah, that was my only fashion note too, is that wonderful outfit she was wearing, that blue. I just like the color.
Yeah, it always looks good. The cut's good. It's a Bill Teese. I don't know that Bill Teese did it, but it makes me think of Bill Teese. My only other fashion note while we're on fashion. The Apgar's hair, I loved it. I love both their hair. Their hair they had. And the Inspector too. It was just weird. It was different, but I liked it.
Yeah.
It was alien hair.
Yeah, it was alien hair. I liked it.
I liked the way the courtroom worked in the holodeck, where they sat at the table. And at first I was like, I know that table's not in that actual room. Mm-hmm. But then we went to the bedroom area and the table was there too. And they just sat there and the rooms moved around. I thought that was really neat.
Yeah. I did too.
Made a space for the table.
this belies my next note, which was, holodeck episode. But I did enjoy the way they did it, especially in the Rashomon concept. And just the idea of, at its base, the idea of the testimony of all the witnesses being played out that way. Obviously, it makes for great TV, but I think it makes for, I think in a courtroom, obviously, it'd be very interesting. I still think they confused the testimony and weighing that. I thought the investigator treated things that happened in there as evidence rather than testimony, which is two completely different things. You know, if you introduce someone as an exhibit, this happened, here's the blood test, this happened, as opposed to what did you see from an eyewitness or what happened when you were there. Those are two completely different things. And Picard even is like, that's hearsay. He's like, and I do not find the investigator's argument on that convincing in any way whatsoever.
The hearsay of hearsay, where it was the assistant's account of what the guy told her was said between him and Riker.
Yeah, I was like,
Okay, so were the aliens called Tanagans?
Maybe, I don't
know.
Well, so he actually said Tanagan Law. The prosecutor did. And since the assistant's name was Tana, I thought, wait, what?
Oh.
So I put
it was her own personal law?
Yeah, so it's like Brannigan's Law.
Well, the law on that planet was only made 10 years ago, and it was her father made it and named it after her. So, conflict of interest.
We got to the range of the whole thing about the way that the scenes were set up in the testimony. The first thing I noted was that I kept trying to imagine. Well, I'm not sure how they did the deposition exactly. If they had somebody like typing into a computer, like each person went and said something to somebody. So the programmer, I kept trying to imagine Riker going and describing to the computer. So Mrs. Apgar kept looking at me just like this. She gave me these eyes like, that's
a good piggyback with my note, because I wrote the holodeck is bad at dialogue, because I thought the dialogue was terrible. But I think you're right. It captured the furtive glances. I'm using furtive again. It caught those glances in between them and that stuff perfectly. But I thought the dialogue was awful.
I will say, I actually really bought the differing accounts between Mrs. Apgar and Riker, because obviously Riker thinks every woman wants him bad. So the fact that she was trying to be charming, I can see where he would take that as coming on to him. I totally get that. I think it was a little more of a stretch to believe her version with the attempted rape. And yet at the same time, I do think that maybe he just misremembered who closed the door, like he was testing the panel. And then all of a sudden she thinks his intentions are something they're not. Yeah. And also combined with the grief, that's got to mess with your memory. So I had a bit of a problem with the sexual assault scene being just a legitimate, honest memory. But at the same time, like I get how those perspectives came out of the same thing.
Yeah, my last note about that was I thought they went too far with that as being something that could just be kind of waved off at the end. Well, it wasn't a crime, no resolution. These are just two different accounts. I mean, it's like that was so extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that she might have been embarrassed. She wouldn't want to, or more specifically, the idea, being certain that your husband was killed by this person because of the other circumstances might have affected the way that she recalled the things that happened. But at the same time, to be to the extreme of he closed the door and grabbed me, that is so.
That's where I thought it was
so extreme, and it just I don't know.
Yeah, and Troy saying she didn't sense any deception. I feel like there should have at least been some type of doubt, or like I think this is how it happened. I don't know. I feel like there should have been something there.
Well, this is the Seinfeld part of the episode to me, because as George said, if you believe it, it's not a lie. So I think she really thinks that in her mind, that's what happened. Enough.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Enough to fool Troy. Yeah.
I'll raise you
the only way I could explain it.
I'll raise you a South Park, actually, and this is one of the later seasons, and it's kind of obscure. But they had an episode where Cartman was taking credit for a joke, essentially, and they kept going through his recollection, showing it through his eyes, and it was just like this sociopathic thing of just like. He completely believed the lie that he was telling. This version of like, oh, this person just hates me, just is so jealous, and just. But the way that it was almost like the holodeck version of that, just the idea of seeing it play out, And this woman could have had some kind of mental issues with that sort of thing, but it's just, I don't like, maybe this was a sign of the times, but the implications of trying to present something like this as being just like a, not he said, she said
down by the seashore.
But the idea of there being just that level of variation, that's not something you should even play with, even in this kind of fictional setting. I don't know if you could pull that off now. Really, it plays into the culture of things. It's just the idea that a woman could misremember something to that extent, I think is dangerous to put out there.
Yeah, I guess you're right that it could lead women to be less believed when they have legitimate reasons to be believed.
I agree. I thought Riker had great self-control, except for the one time he jumps out of his seat and walks around. Although I liked when he walked into the hologram that he got kind of blurry.
I
kind of thought that was cool.
I didn't catch it either, but that is.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool effect. But I thought when the investigator's like, well, here's what we think happened with the energy drain, I was like, that's an unsupported supposition. That is not evidence. You're just saying, here's what we think happened. Count it. Well, I'm like, no, that's not the way it works.
And hypotheticals were given equal weight. Yeah, to your point about taking.
Well, there we are as far as it makes for good TV. Right. It makes for good. It's actually pretty ideal as far as even if you were be able to render testimony in that way. But yeah, sometimes it didn't seem like he was able to make that separation. I love the way you put that earlier. The separation between evidence and testimony.
Yeah, he was.
And maybe it's just the way that it was written or whether it was presented. But yeah, that shouldn't work that way.
Well, and my problem is, and again, he's the prosecutor, but he rejected all of Riker's testimony. I don't think they ever established, I'm going to use a legal term, mens rea, which is a Latin term for intent or motive. What was Riker's motive? What wrong that happened would make him do that? I mean, we've seen him wrong many times. Just not enough happened to make, to me, if I was a juror or anything else, to be like, oh yeah, I could see him getting, I mean, unless you're just like, he lost his mind. After spending one night there.
If you thought a rape accusation would destroy your whole career on Starfleet when he's on path to be a captain.
Yeah.
I was about to say, you're looking through the lens of somebody who actually knows of Riker in some way other than that. But like an actual juror would think, sure, was where are you bringing up this reference? But the whole door thing reminded me of like the Matt Lauer stuff. And
I
was just thinking not everybody has a positive view of Starfleet, and some swaggering. It's almost like that swaggering cop stereotype, coming in. That's fair.
Yeah, to me, I don't think they established an intent or motive. But I see what you guys are saying, though. While we're on that, the creepy notion, do we think Riker puts moves on married women?
No. I don't Only those that put moves first and won it.
That's what I think.
In this case, I think he did not. I think if she came on to him, this woman came on to him, he would have if he was off duty. But given that he was in official duty, he would deflect.
Well, and in his version of the story, his self-control might stretch credibility. But
no, I think you're right there. But I also think if he was off duty, this would be a different thing.
I don't know.
I agree.
What I know of his character, what we've seen, or what they've shown of us in the show, I should say, like on screen, it didn't feel in character. I mean, his testimony felt perfectly fine to me.
Yeah,
it didn't feel like he would, under those circumstances. I felt like he would be kind of like, come on, I know you're married. I'm here on.
If she wasn't married to the guy he was there to see and whatever, then I think game on.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Otherwise, yeah, it's just out of character. And
Riker's a player, but I think he is also serious about his job, and he's not going to risk his career.
Yeah, we've seen. I feel like we've seen examples of him showing not just restraint, but disinterest.
Yes,
unless there's obvious kinds of chemistry happening, and the woman seems to be available, and all kinds of other things. We've never seen him do anything like that. So
I thought 2 weeks ago that he was going to get involved with that Osalinka on the
right. I mentioned that too, and I was glad. I was,
and he didn't. Yeah,
glad of the writing of it. It was there were some clear political differences. There was different agendas, and it wasn't like this whole like, oh, we're still so attracted to each other, we have to make this part of the conflict. He was professional. So
yeah, and then now when we get to Geordi and Crusher and those guys, but Those guys put together a case. They put together evidence. Oh. They put stuff together, and that's how you win a case.
I love Geordi and Wesley's investigation.
I did too.
That was great.
That's yeah. Well, again, procedural is the technical aspect.
That's the best part of it. Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen Geordi's testimony. He was there during that scene that they both had that the difference of like who was coming onto who. I wish it would have. We've maybe even just even if it was just a version of them both being neutral and him not noticing it. I wanted to see something to balance that out.
I would want to see the Geordi one, and in his, she's making eyes at him.
I think Geordi wasn't paying attention to them at all. I think he was focused on his job.
Yeah. But even I still would have liked to have seen something to say that he either had nothing to refute either of them or some like a weight to something. You know what I'm saying? Just another perspective of that scene.
Someone says the holodeck can't create anything dangerous. I was like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Would you have your mind erased? What are you, a droid? Of course it can't.
I agree with you. The holodeck can create something dangerous. I have a real problem believing that the holodeck recreated that equipment so well that it acted without him weighing in on how to, like the doctor weighing in on how to build it.
I wanted, I guess that was tugging at me, but I kind of wanted to believe it. I guess we're calling him the prosecutor. He mentioned at the beginning how much easier it would be on the planet's surface because of all the stuff they would have, all the information they would have. I guess they never really established how much the doctor would have kept records of what he'd been doing, where it would have been backed up. Maybe something with what Geordi was doing when he was there might have been enough to take stock of what equipment was there and what it was capable of doing. Maybe he got to see their notes in enough detail that he was able to upload that. I don't know. I guess that would be a decent explanation.
Why would they go to the trouble of uploading that in such a manner?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
That just seemed ridiculous.
The trouble of doing it for the simulation's purpose, or I guess it's a matter of perspective. How much trouble you think it would be for them to do that? I mean, we've seen them do quite a few things. Geordi in particular, for creating simulations in the holodeck. When it comes to getting as much of data available and just throwing it in there and letting the computer work it out.
Still, experimental technology that they don't understand how it works, and they're gonna go to the trouble of making it actual working.
See, I think that it would have been more trouble to exclude that data. I mean, if they have everything, just like, here, computer, here's everything we have. Here's the notes that the assistant gave me when I was walking around during the tour. Here's what I observed. Here are the schematics of the place. Take it all. I mean, it'd be harder to pick out things that they think would be relevant.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that strange.
No, that's reasonable, though.
During the wife's testimony, Riker looked to Picard like, can you believe this? And Picard wouldn't even look at him. That's cold. I know you're trying to keep your distance, but that's cold.
Similarly, I didn't notice that, but I noticed, of course, during Riker's testimony, the looks exchanged between Riker and Troy. Like, do you see the eyes she's giving me? Look what she's doing. Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah. So, did the transporter beam act like a shield? Is that?
I think that's sort of what they were saying inadvertently. I don't think that it necessarily. Well, that was the effect of it. That's what they showed visually, at least.
Yeah,
it bounced off. We learned more powers of the transporter beam.
Yeah, I mean, it captures you in an energy field that apparently you can break out of and escape from, but there is a field there. So I get that. I thought the assistant's testimony, if she wasn't sleeping with Apgar, she was trying to, right?
I agree. And I kept thinking,
really?
Yeah. She was in love with him.
I was waiting for her to be the one who was behind it at the end.
I think that was the obvious suspect. I think that was the red herring, the obvious suspect that's not really there, which I appreciated.
Didn't occur to me, but if I'd thought about it, that would have been the thing that you would typically. That's the trope you would put into something like that. The whodunit of the assistant being jealous and something.
Well, and to get back to the space station blowing up, as we've mentioned about the warp drive and stuff, it seems like there should be a little more safety security around that energy field that might blow up the entire ship if there's a stray energy bolt that hits.
Well, that was all experimental technology.
There you go. Okay.
Actually, I was about to say that seriously. I mean, it's just, you don't expect those types of conditions. You might, if you're in the process of building it up, you wouldn't necessarily think to have everything like that.
Clearly, Apgar was reckless.
Didn't the readings of the radiation, both in the holes in the ship and during the explosion, already prove Riker's innocence without needing to test if the phaser beam bounced off the transporter?
I mean, the visual representation of it. I mean, you think that was too much? I felt
like the whole thing of, we're going to leave the simulation on that's putting holes in the ship and risking people's lives was completely unnecessary because the existence of the radiation proved it without having to risk anybody else.
Yeah.
This felt like an episode that I need to watch again at some point to understand exactly what they were saying about how the radiation was working. It felt like they were saying that because it was in the holodeck, it wasn't really lethal or something. Or I guess I also missed how it was affecting the rest of the ship when it was bouncing around. I think that would have been other clues during
it tore those holes in the ship, and if anybody had been in the way, it would.
I remember seeing that now. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest. While I'm complaining about some of the logistical parts of this episode, I still really, really liked this episode. Mm-hmm. There's a moment in this episode that I really liked where Picard was prepared to, its seeker was innocent and was prepared to hand him over anyway when the case was going against him.
Yeah.
And I liked that wrestling with the morality of it, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's definitely a callback to the Menagerie, just where Kirk is like, man, this is a lot of stuff. Yeah, I think at the end of part 1, Kirk's pretty much walking around like, what the hell am I going to do with it? You know, everything is looking real bad for Spock and for Kirk too, because he's stuck with him. So I thought, in my mind, that's a kind of a callback to that, which is a good callback because the Menagerie is awesome.
That goes toward what I was saying before about the stakes being tied to morality. The balance of power that's happening there. We have to believe that Picard is actually prepared to do what's right if he feels that it is. I mean, if it's all about just like, let's make a show and like do the best we can until we just say screw it and we're leaving, then no, it doesn't really matter anyway. We have to see some demonstration of like he's really going to do it.
And I guess there's an argument in which I think comes up in a lot of murder trials of I thought I knew this person, but clearly I didn't. You know, there's lots of, you know, I'm trying to think what network, you know, Headline News or where essentially every case they show is like, you know, it's like the neighbor. Oh, I never thought he always is nice and kept to himself. Not exactly that, but it's like, you know, people are usually killed by someone they know. And a lot of it's like, well, I thought I knew this guy, but turns out I didn't. And, you know, so I guess there is an element there. Picard was probably also wrestling with, I thought I knew this guy, but maybe not, you know. And I don't think that was like had equal weight with everything else he knew about him. I think that's probably had to be a thought somewhere, small thought in the back of his head. Like, no, again, to him, he's probably like, well, why would she lie about this? You know,
Jimmy mentioned something like that before, and I'm realizing that now that you say that, I too was just kind of watching this through the lens of someone who's watched all these exploits for what we see on screen. You know, we're along seeing what Picard sees of Riker, you know, all on screen. If I were in that situation in real life, you know, I might go, I might start examining what I've seen and what I really know of this person behind closed doors. Yeah. Picard doesn't really see what Riker's doing every time that he's seducing or being seduced by some woman off on mission.
Right.
He could really start going, wait a minute, you know, maybe.
Yeah.
So the other thing, to what Jimmy was saying before about you like the episode, but you're still some of the things are starting to chip away at that as far as like the way they're describing things scientifically. And I was just going to say that's sort of a double-edged sword for these kinds of episodes, or just Star Trek in general. Is that I appreciate when they make the effort, at least. I guess. So I think that makes a good episode when they really get in there and try to give you an explanation for things, but that still exposes them to more risk as far as,
My last couple notes are kind of negative, honestly. Picard's closing statement where he's talking like there are more than 3 versions that they saw, when he's like, all the witnesses and all the versions. I was like, there's been 3, dude.
Yes. I thought the same thing at the time.
I kind of feel like maybe they did have Geordi's version and other versions, and then they cut them for time. I also think they really had to time that final thing tightly, that they could all go through everything they wanted to show the jury and still be right there when it was time for the beam to bounce. That just seemed way too convenient. Yeah. But they didn't cause the phaser beam to bounce off the transporter through their simulation. That was the real radiation that was happening in intervals. In set intervals.
Right.
And so they timed their whole presentation to the prosecutor at the end, that their presentation and their explanation was done just before the regular interval would have ended up. I mean, what if the prosecutor asked a few questions earlier as they were explaining everything? It would have thrown them completely off.
I didn't catch that.
That's good trial prep there. That's good trial prep.
I guess the idea was that it was happening regularly enough that they could just wait and time it and boom. Yeah.
No, it wasn't that regularly. It was hours apart.
Huh.
I also thought the ending, everybody took the situation a little too lightly. I think that there should have been a little more gravity when it was over.
Yeah.
Well, that goes along with what I was saying before about like they just kind of like dropped that lack of resolution about Mrs. Apgar and Riker's, their accounts about like the sexual assault. I was like, can we like admit somebody say something like, I don't know, nothing. They're just like, well, that's that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, the open door policy, Starfleet wide, Mr. Apgar was able to open the door every time. I mean, shouldn't Mrs. Apgar have been in black at the extradition trial?
She should have been, but
maybe on Tanakia they don't dress in black.
Yep.
Widows don't dress in black.
Their funeral colors are different. Reminds me of something from last week. The timeline they gave, they never said Earth days, but they said less than 25 hours, which would be approximately 24. And
right. Alternate episode.
Mine was, and this might be a real thing, but mine was essentially a Skinamax movie, Lonely Space Housewife. Although probably Skinamax version was Lonely Space Housewives. I feel like I've seen that movie, actually. Maybe it had a different title, but.
My alternate episode was they hired, instead of having Picard do the defense, they hired Denny Crane to do the defense.
That's a good one.
And Shatner cameo.
Wow.
I know this was before Boston Legal. I'm just saying. That would have been great.
Yep.
Well, we do have to run through guest stars and stuff because there were some great people. I will say the episode was directed by Cliff Bull, who's directed a bunch. We've already talked about him a lot. It was written by Ed Zuckerman, and this is the only episode of Star Trek that he wrote. He's best known for being a producer. He's been a producer on Law & Order UK, Law & Order SVU, and JAG. It guest starred. The prosecutor, Inspector Krang, was played by Craig Richard Nelson, who, besides this episode, will guest star on an episode of Voyager called Living Witness, which makes me think it might be a courtroom as well. But he's best known for Quantum Leap, Square Pegs, Three Women.
And Coach.
Mrs. Apgar was played by Gina Hecht.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah.
What? I missed something?
Craig T. Nelson plays Coach.
Yeah.
And Craig
Okay, I did think the name was similar. Mrs. Apgar, Gina Hecht. This is her only Star Trek credit as well. She's best known for Dave, Mork and Mindy, and Seinfeld.
Yeah.
She did 3 episodes of Seinfeld.
Yeah, so I'll tip my hand. She's going to be my crush. I've been in love with Gina Hecht since she was on Mork and Mindy. Yeah, she was on 3 episodes of Seinfeld where she was George's therapist, and he gets mad at her because he has her read their script for the pilot episode, and she doesn't find it funny. So she was also in the movie Night Shift with Henry Winkler. She plays his shrewish wife. Like I said, I think she's a beautiful woman. I thought she looked great in this episode. That's one reason she's my crush. But yeah, she's been a great working actress for a long time.
I was also choosing her as my crush. I mean, I forgive her for casting aspersions on Riker, given her brief. And I thought she was a smart, supportive woman of her husband and also very good looking. So absolutely. I'm right there with Keith. Sorry, with Steven. Keith, do you want to go ahead and give your crush since Steven and I
it's interesting. I thought about that too. There's something I really liked about her. I didn't know all the other connections. And I feel like I don't...
There's also the assistant.
Yeah, I was thinking I don't really feel like I should be able to pick her because...
Oh, yeah, the nude model.
Hearing all of Steven's reasons there was like, wow. I think I might actually have to go with Tana, the assistant.
When I saw Gina Hecht as a guest star at the very top, I'm like, I got very excited, and she did not disappoint me.
I didn't know that's amazing. Like all the other things, though.
So Tana, Keith's crush, was played by Juliana Donald, credited as Julie Donald. She also did an episode of Deep Space Nine as a different character, and she was in that Star Trek Borg video game we were just talking about as yet another character. Well, she is best known for The Muppets Take Manhattan and The Purple Rose of Cairo, as well as Dragnet.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I didn't know any of those things either, so
Yeah.
most of my decisions based on Tannigan's Law.
And our final guest star of note this week was Mark Margolis, who played Dr. Apgar. This is his only Star Trek credit, but I thought he looked familiar, and what I know him from is Breaking Bad.
Oh.
He's got a lot of credit.
He was the guy in the wheelchair that hit the bell.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
He was Tio.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And now he's done a bunch of episodes of Better Call Saul as well.
Salamanca. Hector.
Yeah, Tio Salamanca. That was Dr. Apgar.
Oh my God.
He also was in Pi, Ace Ventura Pet Detective, Scarface. He's been around quite a while. But yeah, I liked him in Breaking Bad. I liked him here.
Wow. We passed it already, but I forgot to mention at the time.
Oh yeah.
I didn't remember the episode until we got to the phaser scene. Like something was like I felt it coming up. The idea of Riker in the simulator turning, just completely out of character. I thought that was funny.
So when I was reading about the diplomatic immunity idea and some other things, apparently the University of Miami School of Law library has this episode in The Measure of Man as part of their film set at their law school. So I thought that was kind of cool. You know what? I should come up with a CLE course based on these two episodes, and that'll be my job the rest of my life, as I'll just go around the country talking to people about it. Let that be my last note.
Diplomatic immunity. I was going to say, just to make it clear to everyone else, that was also the Family Guy portion of the podcast because of the way they would keep running joke, quoting out of context Lethal Weapon 2, it's been revoked.
That's the Pretoria episode too, right? Doesn't he claim diplomatic immunity? He does a whole song and dance.
Oh, that's they can't touch this.
That's it. That's right. You're right. That's what it is.
So, Wesley Annoying, scale of 1 to 10.
I almost gave him a 3. I went with a 2, and it's just because of his one line where I maybe paraphrase, but essentially says, he didn't do it.
I didn't remember that.
Almost went to 3, then I went back down to 2 because he was on the investigation team. He helped solve the problem. But yeah, so I give him a 2.
I was at a 1, but you made me think about it. I didn't catch that line, but there's just one line read somewhere. It was just slightly awkward, so 2.
Oh, well, I'm giving him a 1. I thought he helped out with the investigation. I didn't find any lines annoying. I don't recall the specific line Steven's meaning, so
me either. That's interesting.
Even after he said it, so
it was real early. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Who was your annoyance of the week?
Probably the prosecutor, the investigator. Yeah, I didn't care for his suppositions being turned into evidence.
I don't blame him for that. That's just the law
that he
was following.
I didn't care for it. But he did come around at the end, so I'll give it.
Yeah. I'm gonna say Dr. Apgar.
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah, that was it. Dr. Apgar.
Apologies to Keith. I'm going with Tana. She, I thought, was the closest to a stereotype of our guest.
No, I can totally see it.
Ranking the episode. Let's just start where we were last week. Better or worse than Deja Q?
I probably like Deja Q more. I know I'm not the Q guy, but I think I like
that's
even
that's
defending Q.
Yeah.
I would be torn, but I will say that based on Steven even liking the Q episode, it being a Q episode, that makes it better than this. So
I'm also torn, but I'm fine with going below Deja Q, especially because that episode was a little more, had more like iconic moments. It did have some iconic moments in it. This one did not, although I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah.
Except for the phaser. Just
below Deja Q is Booby Trap.
Holodeck used for similar reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like Leah Brahms, but I think I might like this episode a little better.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. I'm there. It's just
okay.
I'm at least torn. I'll say, but that is.
Well, I'd say that was 2 good episodes in a row, which honestly, after the previous, because we've been doing these 2 at a time in terms of our viewing and recording, and the previous 2, The High Ground, The Hunted, were both so low. It felt really nice to basically have the flip side of that.
Yes.
And get some good episodes. Next week, I have never seen this episode either, but it's one of the most famous episodes of Next Gen, and I'm so excited to see it. It's called Yesterday's Enterprise.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to read the long synopsis of this because I just want to see your faces when we talk about it.
Oh,
the Enterprise is observing a celestial anomaly, something akin to a wormhole, when a starship appears having traveled through it. To everyone's surprise, the ship is the Enterprise C, commanded by Captain Rachel Garrett. The Enterprise C arrives, however, history has changed. Captain Picard and the Enterprise are battle-weary, with the Federation having been at war with the Klingon Empire for 20 years.
Wow.
Lieutenant Tasha Yar is alive, and Worf is nowhere to be found. And Guinan knows something is wrong.
I seem to remember having seen this now, but it's been so long. And I'm
excited. We got Tasha Yar back. We've got the Enterprise C, which is...
Of course.
We will get the Enterprise B in a movie coming up, so we'll get all the Enterprises in between. But we've got Trisha O'Neill playing the captain. Christopher McDonald is also on the Enterprise C. I love Christopher McDonald. He's a major guest star. Whoopi's back. Yeah, I'm just so excited for Yesterday's Enterprise.
I saw Denise Crosby in the little Netflix preview of the next episode, so I forgot.
And it's like she never died.
Yeah.
So I do know how this one ends just from reading about the episode and everything, but I haven't seen the episode, so I'm very pumped.
Yeah, me either.
It's been a long time since I said, since I've seen it, I don't really remember it. And luckily I'll probably forget what the synopsis is before I get there. So
long time.
Yep.
Well, until next week then, live long.
Watch yourself when you're on a space station. And prosper.
Yeah, depending upon your perspective, though. I mean, prospering to one person is like suffering to another. And...
From a certain point of view.
Okay. It's All Been Done presents.
Who's Got the Time?